The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. This is Andy, architect, and Mike Bentley, staff at National Pest Management Association. We'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar this morning on how to hire smart and manage easy. It's now 9 o'clock East Coast time, 6 o'clock Pacific time, and it looks like we have a large contingent of folks joining the call. Our two speakers for this morning are going to be Phil Cooper with Cooper Pest Solutions and Timothy Wong with M&M Environmental. Phil's company is based out of New Jersey. Timothy's out of New York. I'll jump into introductions in a second, but I wanted to give a little bit of background on this webinar. The NPMA Business Development Committee came up with an idea to do a series of webinars on how to recruit, retain, and draw new employees into company culture. So this is the first of a three-part series. They're going to take place in October, November, and December. This one is going to be focused on recruiting and hiring employees. And both Phil Cooper and Timothy Wong are members of the NPMA Business Development Committee and have both volunteered to teach the first course. Couple of housekeeping rules. Number one, the webinar is being recorded. So for anybody who would like to go back and to listen to the webinar and or share with your staffs, we'll make the link available on the NPMA site and send a note out to everybody who's on the call this morning so that you can access that pretty shortly after the webinar ends. The second piece of housekeeping is right now everybody's in what's called listen only mode. We do that so that there's no background noise. So everybody is muted, but on your control panel, there's a little hand icon. We're going to do questions, answers, conversation, discussion at the end of the call today. So if you'd like to ask a live question, just raise your hands. And then as soon as we get done with the two speakers, we will call on you, unmute your line. You can ask the question to the group. If you don't want to ask a question via the live hand chat feature, you can write them into the question box. We'll also read out all questions that were submitted to the speakers afterward for anybody who would like to do it that way. If you have any sort of issues during the call, if you aren't able to hear things, please address them through the chat feature, and we're happy to make sure that everybody is able to engage with the webinar. So with that being said, I think that's the really only ground rules. We think that the two speakers will both talk for approximately 12-15 minutes, and then we'll do questions and answers at the end. So that being said, I'd like to introduce both speakers. Like I said, are both members of the NPMA Business Development Committee. The first speaker this morning is Phil Cooper. I think a lot of people in the industry know Phil. He's the CEO of Cooper Pest Solutions and Bedbug Central. Phil and his brother Rick are second generation PCOs. They're graduates of George Washington University. Phil has taken all that he's learned and turned his organization into a thriving business. I won't read any more, but there's a bunch of accolades. Cooper Pest Solutions, Bedbug Central have been honored by the New Jersey Business Magazine as the best place to work in 2014, finalist for best places to work in 2016. And just a personal anecdote, I had the opportunity to join Phil on his quest to bike across the U.S. for MS and spent a few days biking with Phil across Utah. And it was probably one of the most memorable and enjoyable experiences I've ever had, including the near-death component to it. The second speaker, again, I think a lot of people in the industry know, is Timothy Wong. He is one of the partners with M&M Pest Control in New York City. Tim has a Bachelor's of Science from Penn State University and an MBA from Columbia University. Prior to joining M&M, Tim spent 10 years in investing banking, specializing in acquisition and finance with JP Morgan. He's also been responsible for developing new growth and acquisition strategies. Through his leadership, M&M is an advisor to firms such as Amazon, Nike, JetBlue, Morgan Stanley, and a host of others. M&M has been featured on over 40 national news networks and publications, including the Wall Street Journal, BBC, CNN, Fox News, NPR, and many others. So we're proud to have Tim, whose company has 75 employees and has enjoyed double-digit growth for over the past 15 years. So enough introduction between these two speakers. We have a wealth of knowledge. Appreciate everybody joining the call with us this morning, and would now like to turn it over to Phil to get us kicked off this morning.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Where we're going to go this in the next 12 minutes is looking at recruiting and where we take it, and which we can go to the next slide, which is really thinking about the recruiting process as a sales process. Within the Cooper organization, the Bedbug Central organization, when we're looking at people, we are looking at the bringing of people in no different than we do from a sales process. And we go to the next slide, which is we really are looking at the sources of talent that we are looking for. And we have two different kinds of what you could consider new hires, or as we would with clients. We have new hires that are coming through the door, and we do that through our recruiting process. That's what we're going to spend the majority of the next few minutes on. But we also do bring in outsourced talent. I think that's important to point out that from time to time we will look at different types of needs in the organization and go into a third party and bring in talent that way. So for example, our director of public relations or communications will be going on maternity leave. So rather than hire somebody, we will go to a marketing firm and bring in an outsourced talent. Our CFO is also an outsourced talent. So we don't always bring in talent through the traditional methods or the ways that we would in most of the time we do in the industry. So next slide. We're really going to look at today how we view bringing people in, which is what I call sales funnels. And sales funnels are, we use them commonly in the world of sales, but we a lot of times don't think of it the same methodology when we're thinking of human relations and human resources and bringing in talent. And so at Cooper, and what I suggest for most companies is that you set up funnels and that you look at your people that you're bringing in from a cost per lead. We also look at cost per acquisition. So acquisition would be when we hire somebody, how much does it cost us for the person that we hire? But also we will break that down because we break it down a little bit further. So we'll look at it at a 3-month period. That number changes because there are, unfortunately, on occasion, we will have somebody that doesn't make it through the first 3 months, which then makes our cost per acquisition go higher. And then we look at that same metric at a 1-year period. And the things that we include in cost per acquisition are all of the dollars that we've spent to secure that lead or that person. And that could be advertising, that could be any referral dollars. It's also going to include the dollars that we're spending on labor. So our director, our chief talent scout, Francesca Vigna. So Francesca Vigna handles all of what we're talking about today, but her salary and all her benefits and fully loaded are melded into this cost per acquisition. We also, and within that, we're looking at the amount of time that she's spending doing the recruiting effort and the advertising, any interviewing time, any money that we're spending from our marketing department to create ads. All of that gets fully loaded into our cost per acquisition. And we also add into that any testing that we're doing in the hiring process. So any screening, drugs, background checks, the cost of doing those and the time it takes also get loaded so that we can, from a metric perspective, know what the cost per new hire is and the cost per lead is. So go to the next slide, if you could. So to give you all a sense, for one hire, we need about 75 leads. Now that is a blended ratio from the number of funnels that we're going to talk about in a moment. But 75 leads go to about 20 phone interviews, to about 4 people that are coming through the door for an in-person, to a hire. Now we're looking to improve all the funnels, and we'll be talking about the funnels next. So next slide. So we look at really 4 types of funnels. One is the traditional sources. Right now in our organization, we're getting about 61% of our candidates through the traditional sources. Now we're really trying to shift our people coming in to more of funnel 2 and funnel 3. So within funnel 1, this is the one that, again, people most commonly think. Indeed is accounting for 52%. Craigslist is accounting for 9%. We look at a bunch of other traditional sources, and we're constantly playing around with other ones. Funnel 2 is employee referrals. That makes up 33%. Funnel 3, I think that's the one that is the most fun. Creative advertising or creative sources, that's making up 6%, and we want that to grow, and we're constantly playing with that so that we can make that happen. And then finally, job fairs. Okay, so next. I'm going to move along quickly so we can get over to Tim. Just so you know, we also have assets behind that. So we have, our website is integrated into our recruiting process, and making sure that our staff is constantly motivated is also integrated. You can go next. And so who are we hiring? I mean, this is important. We hear lots about generations. I know all of you have probably been in some kind of generations class in the last 2 or 3 years. But Gen Y and Gen Zs are who we're looking for. And we also are looking very, very carefully at the retail industry. So retail, we believe, has very similar kind of people that we're trying to attract as technicians. And how we bang into that industry and lure them out of the retail industry and into the pest control industry is something we look very closely at. Next, I'm going to finish up on these next couple slides in a couple minutes. Funnel 1, the traditional sources. Again, we change our traditional things by job type, but again, technicians are primarily coming from Indeed and Craigslist. In funnel 2, next slide, the employee referrals, we're constantly reinforcing we're paying $1,000 over time, and it's very important that our team knows that once they refer somebody in, that if it doesn't work out, it's no big deal. Once they refer somebody in and the interview process starts, they are off the hook. They just need to get somebody in. So we do look at that $1,000, and just FYI, when we're looking at cost per acquisition, we're always using this as the yardstick. So if we can get our cost per acquisition below $1,000 on the advertising marketing side, that's great, because we're using the employee referrals, that measurement against that. Funnel 3, the next slide. Again, on the creative side, we're using Facebook, LinkedIn, radio ads, outdoor advertising. So a lot of different things going on there to bring people in the door and get leads there. And then finally, job fairs, we'll skip past that one. So go 2 slides down to A/B testing. What I think is important, and I'll leave you with for this morning, is that we do a lot of A/B testing in our creative. A/B testing, 2 things against each other. And this is an example of 2 different job ads. One is a very simple ad, one is a really long ad. And we test against these 2 to see how they perform. We're constantly tweaking. There's lots of different theories out there on what an ad should look like, different ways to approach ads, different ways to approach job postings, and we're constantly testing different theories, different philosophies, and that's how we're bringing in our leads and working through our funnel. So with that, Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Phil. First and foremost, thanks everybody for taking the time from your busy schedule today to join us. Hopefully, I can share some new ideas with you that you haven't already, tried to utilize in your hiring practices. I'm the CEO of M&M Environmental. Let's go to the next slide. We are a privately owned company headquartered in New York, very close to where Phil's firm is in New Jersey. We have about 75 employees. We have about 62 field technicians. Interesting thing about our company is that we have the average age of our employees is about 31. And our client base, is very strong in terms of, being half corporate and half retail. Our client base includes, 5 of the top 25 Fortune 500 companies in the U.S., which is really interesting because it's tough to really target large companies without, a older team of employees. But in this world, in this day and age, this is a whole new kind of environment now where you have a lot of leading executives that are probably under the age of 40 now. So having a younger team for us is important. To build on Phil's insightful presentation on sourcing candidates, I wanted to share with you some of our top 3 recruiting mistakes that we were able to learn from and turn into strengths into hiring practices. To the next slide, please. And then the next slide as well. I figured the best thing to talk about in terms of sharing with you some of the hiring strategies that we employed that is very helpful. I like to start off by talking about the mistakes that we've made that we've actually had to learn from. And the top 3 is 1, creating generic and uninspiring job description. 2, having too many unqualified in-person interviews. And 3, relying too much on interviews. Phil talked about just now about, job descriptions and, what's the best way of going about it. And I think it's really important because, that's going to be the first kind of thing that your candidates or your applicants are seeing. So let's go to the next slide. I want to tackle each of these individually. When it comes to generic and uninspiring job descriptions, we have to avoid using generic templates. I think it's kind of important it's really important not to just list like qualifications requirements or a laundry list of things that you want from a candidate, because they're going to see, hundreds of ads a day, and people are just going to get, they're not going to pay attention to the details. You also have to format the posting to be a little bit more presentable. Before, when Phil was talking, he was talking about toggling between the 2 job postings, something that was a little bit more formatted and something was a little bit more kind of generic and template. What we found is a lot of people are simply not responding to something that is very generic and not formatted well. Aside from the formatting, you have to write your posting to target the demographic that you desire. If you want to hire millennials, people who are between the age of 18 and 35, your job description must appeal to their wants and needs. And if you want to target Generation X, those between the age of 35 and 50, you might want to highlight different benefits. I mean, if you think all job seekers are looking for the same things, I think what you're going to find in the next following screen is going to be really interesting, because I'm going to highlight 2 surveys here. The next slide, please. This was a survey done by JobVite of surveying 2,000 Americans to find out what are things that are important to them. And I think what you see here is that for a lot of people looking for jobs, healthcare, is by far the number 1, followed by 401 programs and bonuses. And obviously, going down the list, casual dress codes are not as important as they used to be anymore. Now, if you look at the next slide, a survey done by Forbes on millennials job seekers, not just like the previous slide, but the millennials, the age between 18 and 35, to them, these intangibles are more important, like training and development, flexible hours, and healthcare was number 4 on the list. So I think what's important to take away from these 2 slides is that the bottom line is you have to be more specific and deliberate in your job search and target the market you want. If you want to look for a sales team that's a little bit older, Generation X, then you're going to have to focus and highlight different benefits in your job description. And I think it'll allow you to target those a little bit more to your needs. And the next slide, the other mistake that we made, when we were interviewing, is there are way too many unqualified in-person interviews. I think Phil talked about the different type of sourcing in terms of bringing candidates in here, but the problem is that you're going to have a lot of applicants, and what do? And we have to avoid interviewing everyone because time is limited. And that's one of the things that we found to be really painful in the hiring process because it would take too long. One of the things that we did in our job posting that really helped was that we were able to find a way to qualify the candidates. One way of doing that was to put, we simply started adding a sentence in the job description requiring that the applicant write like a small opening paragraph in their email to us as to why the position is ideal for them, as well as attaching their resume. We started doing this because we were getting flooded with resumes and emails, and it was taking too long to go through them. We also stated in our job posting that any emails coming in with just a resume attached would be automatically rejected. This was a neat idea because it allowed us to know exactly which applicant, when they're applying, actually read the posting, and those who are applying blindly and have very little attention to details. The second thing we started doing was conducting initial phone screenings. I think when we started interviewing candidates in person, it can be extremely time consuming, and frankly, you can only do about maybe 6 or 8 of them a day. What we've learned from interviewing a lot of candidates in person is that you can tell a lot from meeting a person, sometime in the first 30 seconds, that they're not going to fit. But when they're in your office, you can't exactly kick them out. So a phone screening was much more effective in terms of getting that initial kind of qualifying candidate pool that you wanted. At times, sometimes we would even skip relying on emails and just call them. The impromptu phone calls were very helpful because sometimes it gave us a better idea of the candidate's interpersonal skills, rather than the formal rehearsed interviews that we would get sometimes from the candidates. Sometimes you don't even need to actually speak to them. I remember phoning a candidate once for a managerial position a few years back, and I only got his voicemail. But his ringtone was very interesting. It was a song that was called Baby Got Back. Now, there was nothing wrong with the song or the person liking the song, but it spoke volume about his judgment in choosing, this as his public ringtone. So sometimes just doing something as simple as, calling him or calling the candidates can be so quick in helping you determine whether the person should even be interviewed or not in person. The next slide, please. Talking about interviews, one of the things that you don't want to do also is rely too much on the interviews. It's true, practice do make perfect, and sometimes can make them too perfect. With enough practice, anyone can improve their interviewing skills and sound amazing. We all have unconscious biases, and it might make us like a candidate for the wrong reasons. Maybe he or she attended the same school as we did, or grew up in the same hometown. To counter these pitfalls, we started giving applicants short quizzes. And this allows for us to really get a good grip on their skill sets. It tests, you could test for the basic math skills or the reading skills. For technicians, reading and understanding pesticide labels is critical. If they can't divide 100 by 5, they probably shouldn't even be in the field mixing pesticides. We once had a candidate that tried using a calculator and still couldn't get the right answer on 100 divided by 5. I know it sounds crazy, but it's frightening. So sometimes, you can meet a person who interviews really well, but if you test their fundamentals and they don't have that, a good quiz can help you kind of identify these candidates quickly. To the next slide. After we change the way we've been interviewing people, these are some of the results that we've gotten. In 2017, this year, in August, we put a posting up on many different boards, including LinkedIn, Facebook, Indeed, Craigslist, and some of the other ones that Phil talked about. And we had 259 applicants. 66 of them replied, with the proper paragraphs, saying why they were interested in the role. So we knew they actually read the posting in detail. So of those 66, we phoned 29 of them. And of those 29, we invited 5 for an in-person interview. And then it led to 1 hire. What's interesting about this is that if you look at the phone screens, 29 out of the 259 is about 11%. The in-person interviews is about, 1.9%. Now the national average for interviews is about 12% of all the resumes that you get in the industry. What we did was we shift that percent or a portion of that to phone screening. And the phone screening, the 29 calls, we could do that in 1 day. And so that was easy. It saved us so much time. What it meant, that 1 hire that we had, it was like a 0.4% conversion rate, which was twice the national average. So I think using these simple techniques and learning from these 3 mistakes was very helpful. The next slide, please. Obviously, the objective, for us today is to, use some of these strategies and tactics to attract better talent, hire faster, waste less time and resources, and at the end of the day, increase revenue. Next slide. While there are many more things that, we had to change in our hiring strategies, these are the 3 that really made a significant impact in helping us grow. If you want more specific on some of these strategies or want more information, or want to share some of your successful strategies with me, feel free to email or call me. Thank you for your time this morning.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fantastic presentations from both of our speakers. We do have a couple questions lined up right now, so I'll go ahead and start with those. The first one, and I believe that they don't indicate who they're addressed to, so you guys can both take time to address each question. The first one is, are hiring exams validated?
Tim, do you want to go first on that one, or?
When you mean validated, I assume you're talking about whether they're qualified by, I guess, human resource or maybe attorneys, I guess, to make sure that the test that you're giving them is probably complying with, hiring standards. The ones we use, most of the quiz that we use in our firm, most of those are those we get from our human resource department, and they work with our in-house counsels and lawyers. We try not to give anybody quizzes that are obviously, we'll ask them questions that are, outside of what's legal. So we try to stick in terms of our internal quizzes and tests. Those are only things that we know are very generic. Something as simple as 100 divided by 5, and nothing, talking about their personal preferences or something like that. I mean, I think that's answering your question. But Phil?
Yeah, and really quick, Phil, sorry, that they did clarify that's exactly what they were asking. So perfect. Go ahead, Phil. Sorry.
I was going to say, when we look at tests, we have a few different kinds of tests that we're running. One is called Merchants. This is one that we actually started doing as part of the PestSure program. We were introduced to it, and basically it finds out if somebody, it asks some real basic questions. It asks a person if they actually do drugs, and believe it or not, people will tell. I mean, you would think that somebody would never answer that they are actually a drug user or that they have smoked marijuana occasionally, but they do. So we are able to weed out a lot of people through Merchants. I was skeptical at first. That's a big one for us, and we do a lot of tests like Tim does, very, very, very objective tests, math tests for technicians. And then the other thing that we do is when we get to more higher level jobs, if we're dealing with a marketing person or or human resources or anything like that, we will make very, very in-depth tests where they're actually showing us how they might perform on the job. And so those really help us on the objective part, and they are validated.
Excellent. Okay. We've got quite a few questions coming in now. The next one, could you share how many technicians on average you're hiring per year?
A lot. We are, just to use the math, we're growing about 20%. So that means that we're adding somewhere around 15 to 20 technicians a year. We are losing about 10%. So that means that we're hiring around 30 a year. So between loss and add, that's what we're bringing in. So it's a sizable amount. Tim, how are you guys doing in that regard?
We're about, we're hiring about 12 to 14 a year, and we're losing about probably, I think a little bit more than you guys, about 15 to 16%. I think that's sometimes the nature of the people you hire. If you're hiring a younger crowd, like those are millennials, they don't have a track record for staying in the firm for a very long time. And when I say very long time, I say longer than 5 years. So I think that's why it's a little bit higher in percentage. But I think, I think that's something that you hit on when you're talking about your presentation, Generation X versus, the millennials, which one do you want to target? I think if you target the millennials, you're going to have a little bit higher attrition rate versus Generation X.
Okay, great. Next question here. It's a two-part question. So the first one is, have you ever included personality testing in pre-screening employees? And if so, would you recommend it, and how did it help?
We definitely have at M&M, and those are usually for managerial positions or customer service representatives, not for technician as much. It's been very helpful because, one of the things that we have to have in terms of being a good customer representative is a good temperament. And these personality traits, when we see the results, we can clearly tell when somebody's just not really right for dealing with customer service. There's so many out there, but we found them to be very helpful, and it helps us eliminate those that we think won't work out. And oftentimes, we test this theory out, whereby we actually, gave these tests to existing customer service people there's already on staff already. And what we found from these results was it was very close to what we were seeing in terms of how they were performing in the field in terms of with customers internally. And those who scored low just didn't do very well with a lot of our clients, and those who scored really high in some of them did exceptionally well and very well liked by everybody. So, Phil?
Yeah, so we are doing, we follow the same path. If you looked at the funnels earlier, we follow the same funnel that, Tim does, where we have the pre-screen down to the phone, down to the personal interview. When they get down to the personal, when it's time for the interview, that's when we introduce our personality testing. And absolutely, we are huge proponents. We do it on all positions. I put a plug in for the one that we use, which is, HRGP. That's Brad Bartlett. But there's other ones out there. I know another big one is, I believe it's called the Culture Index. There are some really, really good personality testing. You have to understand how to use it, how to read it, how to interpret it. And then the other one that we use on sales side is we'll use DISC. But yeah, we absolutely use them, and we think they're a critical part in the final selection.
Excellent. All right, so we've got a couple people asking the same thing, so I'm just going to throw this out there generically really quick. So a couple people have asked if either of you or both of you would be willing to share any samples of perhaps hiring exams or other qualifiers that you have potential employees go through before they can pass your pre-screening procedures. If Tim and Phil, either of you are willing to share that, please feel free to email that to Andy or myself. What we can then do, if you guys are okay with this, is then we can distribute this to the email list of attendees that are on the webinar right now, because we've had a couple people ask that, and then we can get that out to them that way. So if you guys are okay with that, feel free to shoot me whatever, and then we can distribute that information out to everybody after the webinar, if that sounds good to you guys.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to move on to the next set of questions here. What do you find is better, to post or to not post pay in an employee ad?
Phil, do you want to take that first?
We have mixed, we go back and forth on this one all the time, and again, it goes, again, from the A/B testing that we've done, we have pulled that, we pulled it out. But I mean, again, I'll go, Tim, I go back and forth on this one, and right now we're leaning towards not putting it in, but we've done it the other way. So I'm just curious, where have you been on this one?
It's funny because we actually had a big, struggle with this as well last year, and we did a testing on this and trying to figure out which one would be better. What we found is putting a salary range was very important because it helps us qualify the number of applicants. It's true, if you don't put a salary range in it, you're going to get a much more, you're going to get so many more candidates. I remember one time we did it, we had over 500 applicants when we didn't put the salary range in it. But the problem was that only, 40% of them was good because the other 60% was looking for something a lot more, and they were never going to be able to fit into, what we were looking to pay. So I think putting a salary range for us was helpful, especially in our market, because it allowed us to qualify the applicants further. I don't think you have to put the exact amount, but I think putting a range is very important. It doesn't have to be even a very tight range, but it should be a range so that you don't get those who are coming in looking for $150,000 a year, or looking for something that's kind of crazy.
All right, perfect. Next question I have here. Now this one, we've got a couple that are specifically addressed each one of you, so I'm just going down the list. So this one right now is, Timothy, what do you expect in the cover letter from the applicant? What are you discerning from the letter and or email, phone, or email or phone screening? And then I'm sure that, Phil, you could probably address that as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's not even a cover letter that we need. It's basically an opening paragraph in an email. Most people don't even send cover letters anymore, but we want to make sure that they're personalizing the email to us, that they acknowledge some of the points that we're looking for in the posting, because we know there's so many ads out there. We want to make sure that the applicants who's actually applying is actually applying to this ad in this position specifically. So whether they refer to a specific role or some of the responsibilities directly, it's very important, I think, that they do that and that acknowledge that they read it, and then this is a now qualified candidate. So that's important to us. In terms of the phone screening, I think you want to hear, to us it's important that the candidate we speak to, it's not so much, sometimes not even about what they say, sometimes it's about the fact that they're answering the call and they sound professional, they're well-spoken, they're well-mannered, and they're eager. It's funny, sometimes when you call people at like 1 p.m. or in the afternoon and they're still sleeping, I mean, I don't really want to hire this guy, because this is not the guy I want. I want a candidate who's waking up early in the morning, who's out there looking for a job, hitting the pavement, and is eager. So for us, the whole form and the style of them answering the call and maybe sounding that they're actually eager to learn more about the job is important. And in terms of in-person, I think everything has to come into play, right? Everything in terms of body language, what they say. And again, that can be deceiving. So that's why I think the quiz, giving them something as simple as some quick quiz, how they handle it. Sometimes they don't have to have the right answer. Sometimes they can say, listen, I'm nervous, so that's probably why I can't get it right now. Maybe I just need a pen and paper. So that's fine, but it's how they handle these quiz and these questions that is important sometimes. We had a candidate one time just flipped out completely and said that this is unfair. I don't want to take a math test. This is not what I want to do. And that's fine. I know, we didn't mean to offend him, but at the same time, it allowed us to kind of comb through these candidates quickly to make sure that this is probably not the person we want. So I hope that answers your questions.
So when we're doing it, it's very similar to what Tim said. The word that, I think Francesca uses when she's doing our phone interviews is, are they engaged? And that goes back to Tim saying, are they eager? Are they there? I mean, when we're calling them, we want an engaged candidate, and we're doing some quick checking on what they've sent us and if their stories match. So you'd be shocked at how many people rule themselves out because, their life is, they're leading multiple lives in their minds, and they, there's gaps or there's things that are wrong. So that, we work through, but, the engagement is really what we're looking for. And do they have the same value set? We're very clear on what our values are, and we want somebody, if they don't have the values that match up with our values, we don't even need to get down to the interview. We don't need to bring them through the door. And when we go to the interviews, then we're switching over to behavioral-based interviewing and, again, reinforcing to make sure that they do match.
All right, excellent. Next question is, you both mentioned different ways in which, and some of those overlapped, and how you both were reaching out to try to draw in and recruit new employees. And a lot of those were pretty standard methods that I'm sure a lot of people use. This one question was, do you have any creative or out-of-the-box ideas or ways of recruiting or advertising for your candidates other than those that you mentioned?
So, this is the area that we are working tirelessly on right now. We launched a radio campaign, which was a little bit different. And again, the radio campaign was specifically going after the retail segment. So we believe the retail segment really is, they have extraordinarily long work hours. They're not paid extremely well. We think they are ripe for moving into the pest control industry, a great source of great talent. So we're trying a whole bunch of things right now to draw people out of that industry and go into non-traditional work sectors to draw our people into.
Yeah, same here. I think that's a very good question. Something that keeps us up at night, making sure that we are combing through all the traditional and also untraditional means of hiring. We have, one thing that we have done last year that was pretty successful was, hosting events. There are a lot of in New York. There's a lot of street fairs and a lot of local events for businesses, and it allows us to target the neighborhoods of people that we want. In Brooklyn, for instance, in New York City, is a pretty young demographic, and a lot of people in that age range that we're looking for. And we will sometimes host or sponsor, street fairs or local carnivals. And at those events, we would go there and basically, give business cards and talk to people. And I think that's pretty successful. We hired at least 3 people from doing something like that in the past. And now it's, it costs money, but 3 candidates or 3 employees was, well worth the return.
And Tim, I'll add one more thing. And, as I've watched companies around the country, and we look at a lot of companies around the country, it never ceases to amaze me how many people, on the technician side can be brought in from 4-year degree, Bachelor of Science degrees, not necessarily entomologists, but there's kids coming out of college, and this is actually a really, really, really good position for a kid coming out of college with a Bachelor of Science degree. They're having trouble finding what they want. The workforce is complicated. The boomers aren't retiring, and you can draw some really, really good talent actually in a technician role out of from that talent pool. So we look at that closely, and we've been actually been successful bringing in kids that way also, millennials that way.
All right, excellent. All right, I've got a couple questions here that all kind of tie into the drug screening realm, so I'm going to kind of ask them both together. Somebody's expressed some concern that they have quite a challenge in trying to make sure that their potential employees are being truthful. Whenever they do the questionnaires about drug screening, they say that they haven't had much luck. So the question is, how are you able to? What is the best way that you ask questions to get a better response and have better luck screening them? And then the follow-up to that is, are all of your applicants drug and background screened?
Tim, go first.
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. That's one of the things that is a requirement in our firm. We made that, that's really clear in our job posting, and that there will be background check. In New York State, there are a lot of very specific rules as to what you can ask and what you cannot. But we make it very clear that they have to go through a drug test when we hire them. So everybody goes through that. And when they're here and when they hire, we have to do random drug tests. And you actually do a lotto, and you have to pull out names and and screen people that you have working for you. In terms of the criminal background, in New York State, you can't discriminate people. You can't even ask them if they have a criminal record. But there are things you can do to get around that. You can do a criminal background check if you ask them, but you can't simply ask them outright whether they've committed a crime or whether they've served time. So, but you can ask them to sign a waiver to do a criminal background check. And the reason why is because of the fact that we make it very clear that the people that we're hiring are going to go into people's homes. And so our insurance has a very strict requirement as to who we can hire. And also in New York State, and for you to get a pesticide license, you can't have a felony. And obviously, one of the requirements of becoming a technician is you have to pass an exam and become an applicator. So these are some of the requirements that, it's not ours, but we're sharing with them that are imposed on us by the state. And so that's how we get around them. Phil?
Yep. And so we are extremely similar to Tim. I mean, we start with the merchant's test, which again is looking at their is not only looking at drugs, but it looks at them as being if they steal or they're if they just have if they're just, I would say, bad people, not a right fit. And then once we get past through the interview process, we're drug testing, we're doing background checks with all the necessary compliance documents signed, and we're also running an MVR, motor vehicle, because we have to make sure when in New Jersey we're behind the wheel a lot, all the time, and we have to make sure that they're going to fit within the requirements of our risk management program.
And to add to that a little more, it is very expensive to run a criminal background check on multiple states or all 50 states, but it's what we found from doing it. It saved us a tremendous amount of troubles in the future, because I can't tell you how many candidates that we actually really like, but just simply didn't pass the criminal background check. So I think it's important that you as an employer, invest the money on a background check and do the drug screening, because you'll be surprised, you'll be shocked what percentages come back, with them being positive or having an issue.
All right, excellent. Thanks, guys. Here's a question here about the personality test that you guys both mentioned and addressed slightly. Do you have a specific personality test that you use, or is it something that you guys came up with on your own?
So the one that we use again is is formulated through HRGP, which is Hire and Retain Great People. That's the Brad Bartlett group out of Massachusetts. But again, the other one that I've seen that I really think is excellent, I want to say it's the Culture Index, and there's a number of franchises around the country. There's a great one out of Dallas, Texas, and if you're interested in either Brad or the one out of Dallas, and they've done work in the industry, I can get that information and pass that along. But they're both excellent.
It's funny, we use the same test that you use, Phil. So we found those to be exceptionally helpful as well.
Tim, do you do any?
Yeah, we do. We use the same. The Briggs-Myers it's a very important one. There's one that we use that was based on the C. Jung personality test. I think for us, the Briggs-Myers seems to be the one that's most consistent and the one that we use most. And we found that to be very easy to give to a lot of our applicants. So we don't make our own.
Okay, here's a question. Bill, this looks like one of your potential former employees. This is a question from Dennis Gray.
Yes.
He said it's a pleasure to work with both you and Rick for years. One thing he mentioned specifically here is that you used to use Cooper Wow dollars as a method to boost a consistent, superior work ethic. Do you find that this benefit helps to retain technicians in the long run? And what other benefits do you offer now to help with retention and morale?
So, it's, I guess, a little off topic. And, just to give you an idea, I mean, Dennis is a great example of what we strive for. So Dennis was, moved to a different part of the country. And, I think part of what we do with our career and motivation, and even when we're actually recruiting, I think this is an important point. We know that this may not be the final destination for everybody. And when people don't want it to be their final destination, or it's a launching point, we will get as much as 6 or 9 months notice. I mean, there's a lot of time, and Dennis was a great example of this. So Dennis stays in touch with us, and it's a wonderful thing to see him striving and achieving and doing what he's doing. But to answer his specific question, yeah, we do a lot of things internally, and again, it's off topic, but again, it brings people in. We have a very simple mission at Cooper. It's to wow our clients, to wow our teammates, to wow our community, to wow our service partners, which are our vendors. And we live and breathe this. And we give wow dollars at staff meetings. We recognize We've been millennial before millennial was even a word. And there's just so many different things. That would be a webinar unto itself. But yeah, we're doing constant things, and that helps draw in the talent into the funnel at the top of the pool, brings us better talent in, and then couple that with a building that is built to portray an amazing image and a lot of fun and a lot of excitement. And I think we that helps us draw in the talent that we're bringing in.
Yeah, Tim, was there anything that you used similarly as anything to help boost morale or retention?
Well, and we have a lot of, one of the things we do is we do a lot of volunteer work. I think for a lot of our staff, especially our customer service team, is a younger set of employees, and so for them, their values are a little bit different. And for them, we do a lot of team building. We do a lot of volunteer work together. We sponsor probably 3 events a month in terms of what they do on weekends, and it helps build morale. So I think that's important. For the technician field, for them, it's a little different. They like to do things that are a lot of sports. So we sponsor a lot of sports events for them. We also get a lot of tickets for local baseball games and football games, and we give them out. For us, I think making sure that the team has a high morale is important, and the only way to do that is by making sure that you carve out time for them. The one thing that we've been struggling with in terms of boosting morale is some events, when we sponsor them or when we finance them, is we sometimes do it in company time, and that's something that helps. Like we would sometimes have company parties or events where the employees who attend are paid, so that it kind of forces them to commingle with one another. So, well, I think 80% of the events that we sponsor is unpaid. About 20% of it is paid, for them to attend, and it helps because it allows us to make the team bond and forces them to kind of talk to one another. So that's one of the things that we do internally.
And Andy, we do the same. We give a lot of sports tickets away also, but on I guess a scary note, they get to see their CEO get painted like a Philadelphia Eagles guy, and that I don't know if that helps them or hurts them. So
good point. All right, so we have 2 questions left that I think we'll have time for. Phil, earlier on in your talk, you mentioned something about targeting or hiring applicants potentially from the retail industry. Was this, why is that? Was there something specific that you look for in these people? Is there something that stands out from this realm of the industry that you think fits well with the pest management industry? What makes that sector so appealing to you? And then the same thing to Tim.
Well, I think from that sector, when you really analyze it, you're number one, they work incredible hours. I mean, people that go into the retail sector are used to working a lot of hours, and we need people that work, significant number of hours on the technician side. At the same time, when we're dealing with other things, if you can provide some flexibility and you can provide some different avenues for them, you take what is a fairly good work ethic and good and usually good customer service skills, which we need to have, and we can then shift them into an environment where they get one-on-one face time, they get some flexibility, things that they may not have in the retail sector, and you have an attractive candidate. So that's why we look at that market as a viable source of recruits.
I think that's genius, Phil. I mean, we have done the same, and I can't tell you how easy it is to qualify candidates, who are actually working in the retail market and going up to people and talking to them. I mean, when you get a customer service rep, even at a Modell's or a Best Buy or a Macy's, you can tell instantly whether this person who's talking with you has shares the same value, has the right, go-to attitude. So I think the retail industry, I mean, really targeting that is just a genius way, and it's a quick way of really identifying candidates. So terrific idea.
All right, so here, let's get to our last question here before we wrap up. This is kind of a follow-up question to something you both had spoken on before, and that was talking about the background screening procedures you use. And you guys had mentioned merchant. Is this background screening process available for anybody, or is that something that's only exclusive to merchant?
I'm 99% positive it's available to anybody in the industry. So we can again pass that along to you, so MPMA can post it, and just make sure that I don't know if they have a referral fee, but if they do, I would certainly love to get the referral. I don't know how that works.
Split down the middle.
But we'll get it along to you guys, no problem.
Okay, great. Tim, did you have anything to add on to that, or
No, I
anything
mean,
else for background screening?
for the background screening, oftentimes we use the ones that there's a number of them, but ADP also provides one from our payroll. They all basically do the same thing. It's all about the fee. I mean, these background checks have become a commodity these days, I think, and the question, they've gotten cheaper, which is helpful. But it's important, like I stressed before, that when you do a background check, you want to make sure you do one of all 50 states and not just the local state.
And just so we can be clear, I'm sorry, Tim, just to be clear, merchants is not a background check. I think that's very, very important. Background checks we do when we're ready to hire. Merchants is a pre-screening test, and it's very, very different, where it's just asking a bunch of questions, and it's looking for people that are dishonest, that probably are using drugs, that most likely are likely to steal. It identifies the key risk factors that would make a potential hire bad, and it's a knockout test. So it's definitely not background. It's really interesting, and I can tell you a large number of the top 100 companies in the United States on the PCT Top 100 list are absolutely using that tool right now. So it's widely used in the industry by the best of the best.
Oh. So I think, Andy, you were talking about not criminal background, you're talking about just regular background check then? In the question?
Yes. It initially asked for a background screening,
Okay.
and that being a test. But if there was anything specific, if you could only go through merchant for that, or if you had to go through merchant for that.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, Phil.
Yep.
All right, so gentlemen, we have about 2 minutes left, which is perfect time to give each of you about 60 seconds to offer some final closing comments. If you have anything else you want to share with the audience before we bring this to a close.
Phil?
Okay, so, again, for everybody out there, I just think you want to think about this just the way Tim and I have laid it out, which is it's a process. You want to bring in a lot of candidates into the top of the funnel, have a quick way of working them down so you're not spending an inordinate amount of time weeding them down to getting them to those phone interviews, having a great phone interview process so that you can screen people out quickly to get you to those 4 to 5 interviews for that one job. And I think if you use that funnel concept that both Tim laid out and I laid out, and you're bringing in lots of people at the top of the funnel in creative ways, you're going to be recruiting in great candidates and having great hires.
Yeah, I echo what Phil says. I mean, the key here is bringing as many candidates as possible, and then the second most important thing is really go through them quickly and qualify them. The one thing that I think we've learned is that hiring is almost like a full-time job. Most companies, they don't have the resource to have a dedicated person just doing human resource. But if you could afford it, it's well worth the investment, because the most valuable asset in your firm, or at least in our firm, is the people, and you have to invest in it. And garbage in, garbage out. And if you bring in really qualified people, you're going to see the return in your numbers. And I think it's really important to invest the resource to finding that person to help you qualify these candidates. Because if you're doing as many hires as Phil and I are doing a year, it's a full-time job. You really can't do this part-time. You can't bring in somebody to allocate maybe 3 or 4 hours a week or a day doing it is really a full-time job. Because once you bring them in, you have to really nurture them, foster them, and train them. So, and then you're going to have attrition. So this metric and this system has to be, greased and oiled, and it has to be able to continually run as your company grows.
All right, well, thank you so much. And that is perfect timing. That brings us right up to our full hour. Really quick, I just want to say thank you so much to both Tim and Phil for being such fantastic educators on this webinar. This was a really fantastic start. You both really raised the bar for our the very first webinar of this 3-part series for Hire Smart, Manage Easy. So the next 2 months, we will have each month we will have one more webinar series for this 3-part series. But thank you both so much for being such fantastic presenters, and everybody that's on, we'll make sure to get this recording out to you as soon as possible. So thank you both so much again, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Michael and Andy. Thanks.